This is Tiberius, the second Roman emperor, who lived a life filled with power, intrigue, and tragedy. From his reluctant rise to power to the dark years of his reign, Tiberius's story is one of the most fascinating in Roman history. Did you know that he once withdrew from Rome to live in seclusion on the island of Capri? Or that he was forced to divorce the love of his life and marry the daughter of Augustus, the former Roman emperor? Stick around to uncover the truth about his mysterious life and how he shaped the Roman Empire in ways you might never expect. Tiberius was born on November 16, 42 BCE, into the distinguished Claudian family, one of the most ancient and revered lineages in Rome. His father, Tiberius Claudius Nero, was a Roman magistrate who sided with Julius Caesar during the civil war against Pompey. His mother, Livia Drusilla, hailed from the prominent Livian family, adding further prestige to Tiberius's birth. His birth occurred during a tumultuous period in Roman history, marked by the aftermath of Julius Caesar's assassination and the subsequent power struggles among his successors. From his early beginnings, Tiberius was not marked for greatness. His father, a staunch supporter of the Republican cause, initially opposed Octavian, later Augustus, aligning with Mark Antony and fighting in the civil wars that followed Caesar's death. This political stance forced Tiberius and his family into a life of exile. During this period, he experienced the instability that defined the late Republic. His family fled to Sicily and later to Greece, seeking refuge as the tides of war shifted. When the political landscape changed, Tiberius's father reconciled with Octavian, allowing the family to return to Rome. In 38 BCE, his life took a dramatic turn when his mother, Livia Drusilla, divorced his father and married Octavian, who was rapidly consolidating his power. This union brought him into the orbit of the man who would become Rome's first emperor. This marriage brought young Tiberius into the household of one of Rome's most powerful men. Octavian, though not Tiberius's biological father, became a significant figure in his life, and the marriage to Livia connected him to the very center of Roman political life. Raised in the household of Augustus, he was provided with an education that reflected his new status as a member of the imperial family. The education of a Roman nobleman was rigorous and comprehensive, designed to prepare him for a life of public service. Tiberius was trained in the art of rhetoric, essential for any Roman statesman, as the ability to speak persuasively was a critical skill in both the Senate and the courts. He studied philosophy, which was highly valued among the Roman elite for its emphasis on ethics, governance, and personal conduct. The works of Greek philosophers, particularly those of Stoic and Epicurean schools, were likely a part of his studies, as these philosophies were influential in shaping the values and behaviors of Roman leaders. In addition to rhetoric and philosophy, he was instructed in the practical skills necessary for governance. He learned about Roman law, the administration of the provinces, military tactics, and the management of finances. This education was intended to prepare him for a potential role in public office, though at the time it was not certain what his future would hold. Augustus, who had no biological sons, began to take an interest in Tiberius as a potential successor, recognizing his intelligence and capacity for leadership. However, Augustus was also cautious, aware that the path to succession was fraught with challenges and uncertainties. His youth was also shaped by his interactions with other members of the imperial family. He had a close relationship with his younger brother, Drusus, who shared in his education and upbringing. The two brothers were often seen as a pair, and their close bond would play a significant role in their later lives. Tiberius was also exposed to the complex dynamics of the imperial court, where political alliances and rivalries were a constant reality. These early experiences likely contributed to the development of his reserved and cautious nature, as he learned to navigate the intricacies of Roman politics. Despite his privileged upbringing, Tiberius's youth was not without its difficulties. The forced separation from his father, whom he rarely saw after his mother's remarriage, and the uncertainty of his position within the imperial household were sources of personal conflict. He was aware that his future depended on the favor of Augustus, and he likely felt the pressure to prove himself worthy of the opportunities afforded to him. As he grew older, his education expanded to include military training, a crucial aspect of a Roman nobleman's preparation for public life. He learned the art of war, including the strategies and tactics that would later serve him in his military campaigns. By the time he reached adulthood, Tiberius had been groomed to fulfill a role in the upper echelons of Roman society, with a strong foundation in the skills and knowledge necessary for leadership. His military career, which began in his early 20s, was shaped by the Roman tradition that valued martial skill as a key component of leadership. The young Tiberius was well prepared for his military duties, having been trained in the art of war and having studied the strategies of Rome's greatest commanders. His early experiences on the battlefield were instrumental in developing the qualities that would later define his approach to both military and political leadership. His first significant military assignment came in 20 BCE, when he was 22 years old. At this time, Rome was engaged in a complex and delicate diplomatic situation with the Parthian Empire, one of its most formidable rivals in the East. The Parthians had humiliated Rome decades earlier by capturing the legionary standards during the Battle of Capri in 53 BCE, a catastrophic defeat for Rome led by Marcus Licinius Crassus. The loss of the standards was not just a military setback, but a severe blow to Roman pride and prestige. Augustus, who had by then consolidated his power as the first Roman emperor, recognized the importance of retrieving these standards to restore Roman honor and to assert his authority on the international stage. The task of negotiating their return was entrusted to Tiberius, reflecting Augustus's confidence in his stepson's abilities. He traveled to the east, where he was charged with conducting delicate negotiations with the Parthian king, Phraates IV. This mission required not only military acumen, but also diplomatic skill, as he had to navigate the complex and often treacherous world of Eastern politics. The negotiations were tense, as the Parthians were reluctant to give up their hard-won trophies. However, Tiberius approached the situation with patience and strategic insight. He was able to leverage Rome's military strength and the possibility of an armed conflict to persuade Phraates IV that returning the standards was in his best interest. The successful retrieval of the Roman standards was a significant diplomatic victory for him and Augustus. It was celebrated in Rome as a triumph, and Augustus proudly displayed the recovered standards in the Temple of Mars altar, which he had built specifically to commemorate this achievement. This success was a major milestone in his early career, enhancing his reputation as a capable leader and a skilled diplomat. Following this diplomatic triumph, Tiberius continued to distinguish himself in military service. Over the next several years, he was entrusted with various commands in the western provinces, particularly in Gaul and along the Rhine. These regions were of critical importance to Rome, as they were the empire's frontiers against the Germanic tribes, who posed a constant threat to Roman stability and territorial integrity. His campaigns in Gaul and along the Rhine were focused on consolidating Roman control, suppressing rebellions, and securing the empire's borders. The situation in these regions was often volatile, with local tribes resisting Roman rule and launching frequent raids across the frontier. He demonstrated a keen understanding of the complexities of frontier warfare, employing a combination of military force and diplomacy to achieve his objectives. One of Tiberius's most notable achievements during this period was his campaign against the Germanic tribes. The tribes of Germania were fierce and determined adversaries, known for their guerrilla tactics and their ability to exploit the dense forests and challenging terrain of their homeland. Roman commanders had long struggled to bring these tribes under control, and the region remained one of the most challenging areas for the Roman military. He approached the Germanic problem with characteristic discipline and strategic foresight. He recognized that a purely military solution was unlikely to succeed in the long term, given the vastness of the territory and the mobility of the Germanic tribes. Instead, he sought to combine military action with efforts to secure alliances with certain tribes, using diplomacy to divide and weaken his enemies. Another significant achievement was the suppression of the Pannonian and Dalmatian revolts, which broke out in 6 CE. These uprisings, driven by heavy taxation and conscription, spread rapidly across the Balkans, challenging Roman control in the region. Faced with this crisis, Augustus dispatched Tiberius to suppress the revolts. He approached the situation with methodical precision. Recognizing the advantages the rebels held in the rugged terrain, he avoided direct confrontation at first, focusing instead on securing strategic locations and cutting off the rebels' supply lines. Through a combination of military force, psychological warfare, and diplomacy, Tiberius gradually weakened the rebel forces. He exploited internal divisions among the tribes, offering clemency to those willing to surrender, which sowed discord among the rebels. The turning point came when he managed to isolate the main rebel forces in Dalmatia, cutting off their supplies and forcing them into a defensive position. After months of relentless pressure, the rebels were defeated and the uprisings were quelled. Tiberius's successful suppression of these revolts demonstrated his exceptional military leadership and strategic acumen. This victory not only secured the stability of the Roman Empire's Balkan frontiers, but also bolstered his reputation, solidifying his position as Augustus's most trusted commander and paving the way for his future as emperor. His personal life was deeply intertwined with the political machinations of the early Roman Empire. In 19 BCE, he married Vipsania Agrippina, the daughter of Augustus's close friend and ally, Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa. This marriage was initially a happy one, and Vipsania bore Tiberius a son, Drusus Julius Caesar, in 14 BCE. However, his personal happiness was often subordinated to the needs of the state. In 12 BCE, following the death of Agrippa, Augustus compelled Tiberius to divorce Vipsania and marry Julia the Elder, Agrippa's widow and Augustus's only biological daughter. This marriage was meant to further cement Tiberius's position within the imperial family. However, it was an unhappy union. Julia's infamous licentiousness and Tiberius's austere nature were wholly incompatible, leading to deep personal and marital discord. He reportedly continued to love Vipsania and was deeply grieved by their forced separation. Despite his personal unhappiness, he continued to rise in the political hierarchy. Augustus began to entrust him with greater responsibilities, including the administration of key provinces and military commands. Tiberius's successes in these roles further solidified his standing as a potential successor to Augustus. However, his path to power was not straightforward. Augustus favored other potential heirs, including his grandsons Gaius and Lucius Caesar, who were the sons of Julia and Agrippa. For a time, it seemed that he would remain a powerful figure, but not the ultimate heir. Tiberius's relationship with Augustus grew increasingly strained in the early years of the 1st century CE, frustrated by his marriage to Julia and by Augustus's favoritism towards other potential heirs. He made the surprising decision to retire from public life in 6 BCE. He withdrew to the island of Rhodes, where he lived in relative obscurity, engaging in intellectual pursuits and maintaining minimal contact with the Roman political world. This withdrawal was unusual for a man of his standing, and it puzzled many in Rome. Tiberius's self-imposed exile lasted for nearly a decade. During this time, Augustus's favored heirs, Gaius and Lucius, both died unexpectedly, leaving Augustus with few options for a successor. Reluctantly, Augustus recalled him to Rome in 2 CE, reinstating him as his principal heir. Upon his return, he was granted tribunician power for 10 years, marking his official status as Augustus's successor. Following his return to Rome, Tiberius resumed his military and political duties with renewed vigor. He was sent on various campaigns, including in Germania, where he successfully quelled uprisings and reinforced Roman authority. These campaigns further demonstrated his capability as a leader and cemented his reputation as a military strategist. His position as Augustus's heir became increasingly secure as the emperor's health began to decline. In 4 CE, Augustus adopted Tiberius formally as his son, making him the primary heir to the imperial throne. As part of this adoption, he was required to adopt Germanicus, his nephew and the son of his brother Drusus, who had died in 9 BCE. This move was likely intended to secure the line of succession and to appease the Roman populace, who held Germanicus in high regard. In 13 CE, Tiberius was granted equal powers to Augustus, effectively making him co-emperor. This arrangement allowed for a smooth transition of power upon Augustus's death. When Augustus finally died on August 19, 14 CE, he was in a strong position to assume control of the empire. His accession to the imperial throne was marked by a certain reluctance. Despite being the obvious choice, he hesitated to accept the position, possibly due to his awareness of the immense responsibility and the challenges that lay ahead. Some historians suggest that his reluctance was genuine, reflecting his preference for a more private life. Others argue that it was a calculated move to demonstrate humility and respect for the Senate. Nevertheless, the Senate confirmed Tiberius as emperor, and he formally accepted the role. His first acts as emperor were cautious and measured. He sought to continue Augustus's policies and maintain the stability that had been achieved during the previous reign. His initial reign was marked by a desire to govern in collaboration with the Senate, respecting its authority and traditions. However, his relationship with the Senate soon became strained. He was a reserved and secretive man, qualities that did not endear him to the senatorial class, who found him difficult to approach and understand. His reluctance to engage in public spectacles and his disdain for the adulation often associated with the emperor's role further alienated him from the Roman elite. The early years of Tiberius's reign were relatively peaceful. He continued to manage the empire's affairs with a focus on efficiency and stability. However, his reign would soon be overshadowed by one of the most notorious episodes in Roman history, the rise and fall of Lucius Aelius Sejanus. Sejanus was a powerful and ambitious officer who served as the prefect of the Praetorian Guard, the elite soldiers tasked with protecting the emperor. He quickly became one of Tiberius's most trusted advisors, and for a time he wielded enormous influence over the emperor. Sejanus used his position to eliminate potential rivals, including members of the imperial family. His machinations led to the execution of many prominent figures, including Agrippina the Elder, the widow of Germanicus, and her 2 sons, Nero and Drusus. Sejanus's influence grew to such an extent that he began to aspire to the throne itself. He carefully plotted to consolidate his power, but his ambitions ultimately led to his downfall. In 31 CE, Tiberius, who had been living in self-imposed seclusion on the island of Capri, became aware of Sejanus's treachery. Acting swiftly, he ordered Sejanus's arrest and execution. The fall of Sejanus was followed by a brutal purge of his supporters, further cementing his reputation as a ruthless ruler. The later years of Tiberius's reign were marked by increasing paranoia and a growing detachment from the affairs of state. Following the Sejanus affair, he withdrew even further from public life, choosing to remain on Capri, where he lived in relative isolation. From there, he continued to govern the empire through correspondence, relying on a small circle of trusted advisors. During this period, Tiberius's rule became increasingly repressive. Trials for treason, maestas, became more frequent, and the atmosphere in Rome grew tense as fear and suspicion permeated the political landscape. The use of informers became widespread, leading to the execution of many individuals on charges of disloyalty to the emperor. These events contributed to the perception of Tiberius as a tyrant, a ruler who governed through fear rather than through respect or love. His isolation on Capri fueled rumors and speculation about his personal life. Ancient sources, particularly the historian Suetonius, depict him as a man given to debauchery and excess, indulging in various vices during his time on the island. However, the veracity of these accounts is difficult to determine, as they are often colored by the biases of their authors. What is clear is that Tiberius became increasingly withdrawn and distrustful, qualities that only intensified the sense of unease in Rome. His personal life was marked by tragedy and unfulfilled relationships. His first marriage to Vipsania Agrippina was by all accounts a happy one. However, his forced divorce from Vipsania and subsequent marriage to Julia the Elder brought him little joy. His relationship with Julia was deeply troubled, and her later exile on charges of adultery only added to Tiberius's personal grievances. He had one son, Drusus Julius Caesar, from his marriage to Vipsania. Drusus was a promising young man who, like his father, pursued a military career. However, Drusus died in 23 CE under mysterious circumstances, possibly poisoned. The death of his son was a profound blow, contributing to his increasing disillusionment with his role as emperor. Tiberius's relationships with other members of his family were similarly strained. He harbored deep suspicions towards Germanicus, his adopted son and a popular figure in Rome. Germanicus's untimely death in 19 CE was another source of sorrow, though it also removed a potential rival. The deaths of Germanicus's sons, Nero and Drusus, at the hands of Sejanus, further isolated Tiberius from his family. Despite his austere and often harsh public persona, he had a range of personal interests that reflected his intellectual inclinations. He was a lover of Greek culture and philosophy, a common trait among the Roman elite of his time. He was particularly interested in astrology and often consulted astrologers, a practice that further fueled his superstitious tendencies. Tiberius was also known for his frugality and simplicity, at least in his earlier years. He preferred a modest lifestyle, avoiding the excesses that characterized some of his predecessors and successors. Even as emperor, he maintained a certain degree of personal austerity, which contrasted sharply with the opulence of the Roman court. However, as he aged and withdrew to Capri, his lifestyle reportedly became more indulgent. Ancient sources suggest that he engaged in various forms of debauchery, though these accounts are likely exaggerated and may reflect more the moralistic judgments of later historians than the reality of his life. His diet was said to be simple, in keeping with his general approach to life. He preferred plain food and was known to avoid lavish banquets, which were common in Roman society. His preference for simplicity extended to his dress, as he often wore the traditional toga rather than the more elaborate garments favored by other emperors. Tiberius's health began to decline in the early 30s CE. By this time, he had largely withdrawn from public life, preferring to remain on Capri. His isolation and growing paranoia led to further purges in Rome, as he sought to eliminate any potential threats to his rule. His distrust extended even to his chosen successor, Caligula, the son of Germanicus, whom he adopted in the last years of his life. Tiberius's death on March 16, 37 CE, at the age of 77, marked the end of a long and tumultuous reign. The exact circumstances of his death are unclear, with some ancient sources suggesting that he was smothered to death by Caligula's orders. However, it is equally likely that he died of natural causes, given his advanced age and declining health. He was succeeded by Caligula, whose reign would prove to be one of the most notorious in Roman history. The transition of power was relatively smooth, though the memory of Tiberius's rule remained controversial. In his will, he left significant sums of money to the Roman populace and the Praetorian Guard, possibly in an attempt to secure a favorable legacy. However, his reputation as a tyrant and his repressive policies overshadowed any such efforts. Tiberius's legacy is one of the most complex and debated in Roman history. During his lifetime, he was often seen as a capable but dour and unapproachable ruler. His preference for isolation and his reliance on fear as a tool of governance earned him a reputation as a tyrant. This perception was further reinforced by the writings of ancient historians like Tacitus and Suetonius, who portrayed him in a largely negative light. However, modern historians have reassessed Tiberius's reign, recognizing his contributions to the stability and continuity of the Roman Empire. Despite his flaws, he maintained the structures established by Augustus and ensured the empire's survival during a critical period. His military successes and his effective administration of the provinces helped to secure Rome's frontiers and maintain its prosperity.